About 22 years ago, I was grinding away at a small-town packing plant. Life had just taken a nosedive. I'd ended a 4-year relationship after discovering my ex had been cheating on me. A betrayal that left me questioning my self-worth. Yet, even as I nursed my wounded pride, I resolved not to drown in self-pity. I threw her out of my life, packed up the memories, and vowed to rebuild myself. In the weeks following that breakup, I buried myself in work. The long shifts, overtime, and camaraderie with my tight-knit crew helped numb the sting, but I also knew deep down that life had to move forward. I began casually dating again, determined not to let my past define my future. Then, as if fate decided to give me a second chance, I met her, a woman who would soon upend my life in ways I couldn't imagine. She was the receptionist at the plant, recently divorced and fresh out of a relationship that had left scars of its own. There was nothing conventionally striking about her looks, but her personality radiated warmth and energy. She was fun, outgoing, and her laughter filled the room every time she walked by. In those early days, it seemed like a breath of fresh air. We'd chat during coffee breaks and share laughs over lunch. I thought, finally, I was on the road to recovery. But as we grew closer, she began to drop hints, casual remarks about moving in together, dreams of a future that went far beyond fleeting romance. Every time she mentioned these plans, an uneasy feeling would creep in. Perhaps it was my lingering memories of betrayal, or maybe it was simply intuition warning me to tread carefully. Either way, I kept my guard up, not fully surrendering to the hope of love. I remember thinking, maybe I'm overreacting, but I can't shake this nagging doubt. Work soon became even more hectic. I started volunteering for extra shifts, determined to secure my future and make up for lost time. The plant buzzed with activity, machines churning, employees hustling, and me, always trying to stay one step ahead. During one particularly grueling evening, while my crew and I were on break, one of the guys leaned in and whispered, "Hey man, isn't your boss's car parked somewhere near your girlfriend's apartment? Seems odd." I froze. I looked up, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual despite the sudden chill. He shrugged, his tone matter of fact. "I saw it there the other night. My buddy said he noticed it from his car, and you know how these things go." My mind raced. My boss, who lived about 30 miles away, had no reason to be near her apartment unless he was up to something. And the fact that I'd been working overtime that very night only deepened the suspicion. A single thought echoed in my mind. There's only one explanation. Yet, I said nothing aloud. I kept a tight lid on my growing anxiety, returning to work with a forced normalcy. But inside, I was seething with anger and disbelief. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, each repetition fanning the flames of suspicion. The weekend arrived, and with it, another unexpected work shift. My girlfriend had mentioned she was going to the casino with some friends, a detail that now rang hollow. My gut told me that was just another lie to cover her tracks. That night, instead of heading home to reflect on another lonely shift, I drove straight to her apartment. The streets were dimly lit, the cool night air doing little to soothe my inner turmoil. I parked a few houses down and walked up to her door, each step heavy with dread and resolve. When I reached the door, I knocked firmly. Seconds ticked by until I heard a hesitant voice from within. "Who is it?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves before replying in a soft, controlled tone. "It's me, baby. I just wanted to drop by." The door remained silent for what felt like an eternity. I could almost hear my own heart pounding. Finally, I heard the faint sound of a lock turning. The door creaked open, and there she was, wearing nothing more than a thin bathrobe, her eyes wide with panic. Behind her, I noticed something I could never have expected. A man's jacket, draped carelessly over a chair. My boss's jacket. At that moment, everything clicked into place. I stepped inside without hesitation, My eyes locked on the jacket and then slowly scanning the room for any signs of denial. I took a deliberate step forward and said, with a voice that left no room for argument, "All right, come on out." For several long seconds, the only sound was the ticking of a clock on the wall and the pounding of my heart in my ears. Finally, as if emerging from the shadows, my boss stepped out of the bedroom. His face was etched with regret and guilt, a far cry from the confident leader I once knew. I wasn't angry in the way you might expect. I was cold, measured, and determined to hear the truth. I looked him directly in the eye and asked, calmly, "How long?" The question hung in the air. My boss exchanged a nervous glance with my girlfriend, and then, with a barely audible murmur, said, "About 2 weeks." 2 weeks. It felt like an eternity condensed into a single phrase. I processed the words, each syllable confirming what my instincts had already screamed. I couldn't even muster surprise. Instead, I replied evenly, "If you wanted her, you could have just told me. We could have handled this like adults." His eyes flickered with shame, and he stuttered an apology. "Man, I'm really sorry." But I cut him off, sharply. "I don't care." In that moment, I made a decision. I turned my gaze to my girlfriend, who tried desperately to speak, to justify her actions. But I ignored her completely. To me, she was already nothing more than a ghost from a past I was determined to erase. Before leaving, I added one final remark to my boss, a statement that sealed the deal. "This doesn't affect my overtime, right?" He hesitated for a split second before quickly nodding. No, you'll still get your shifts." I gave a curt nod in return, then turned on my heel and walked out, leaving them to face the consequences of their betrayal. In the days following that confrontation, a strange sort of calm settled over me, a cold, detached satisfaction that came from knowing I'd finally faced the truth. But fate had yet another twist in store. One morning at the plant, as I was finishing up an overtime shift, a younger woman approached me. She was about 20 years old, new to the plant, and had an air of defiant confidence. I soon learned that she had been intermittently involved with my boss. With a curious mix of anger and curiosity in her eyes, she pulled me aside and asked, "So, what really happened between you and him?" Her tone wasn't one of idle gossip. It was edged with indignation. I told her everything, laying out the facts as plainly as I could. The details of betrayal, the confrontation, the cold calculation, it all spilled out. Her reaction was immediate. She wasn't just surprised, she was furious. After a long, heavy pause, she smirked and said, "Well, we should go out and piss them off." That invitation was all the confirmation I needed. We agreed to go out that night, an evening designed not just to celebrate our mutual defiance, but also to serve as a form of poetic justice. The night was wild, full of raw energy, rebellious laughter, and the kind of reckless abandon that only comes when you're determined to show the world that you're not a victim. Word spread fast. By the next week, while working in the plant's break room, I overheard a coworker loudly remarking about my date. I looked up as he continued. "Heard it was the best trade he ever made. No regrets, right?" I simply smiled. The message was clear. I wasn't broken. I was in control. My boss, however, wasn't as composed. His face turned a deep shade of red before he abruptly excused himself and stormed out of the room. For 2 long weeks afterward, he avoided even the briefest conversation with me. It was as if my simple act of defiance had wounded his pride too deeply to face. As the weeks turned into months, the consequences of that fateful confrontation rippled through the plant like shockwaves. Every Friday, the plant's system of discounted food orders was put into play. Employees would pay the receptionist, receive a ticket, and then collect their order. This routine, once mundane, became a battlefield for deception. One Friday, I witnessed something that set off a chain reaction. My boss, acting with an air of entitlement, walked up and casually announced he was taking 10 boxes, roughly 100 pounds of food. He assured me he'd pay on his way out, and I watched as he strolled away, never pausing at the receptionist's station. Curiosity and suspicion got the better of me. I immediately called the plant accountant and asked him to check the cash box for any record of a ticket under my boss's name. The answer was unequivocal. There was nothing. This wasn't a one-off incident. It soon became evident that my boss had been pilfering from the company for months. An investigation was launched, and once all the evidence was compiled, he was promptly fired. It was a small victory, but one that validated every instinct I had. But the story didn't end there. In the aftermath, management began scrutinizing the discrepancies in the cash box. It turned out that my ex-girlfriend, the one who had once seemed so eager to talk about our future, had been complicit. Every time my boss took food, she pretended that a ticket had been issued, effectively covering for him. For a while, they managed to fly under the radar. However, the cash box always seemed a few dollars short, an anomaly that couldn't be ignored forever. To catch her in the act, management devised a trap. One day, a worker paid for food using a $100 bill. By the end of the day, the cashier's report revealed that the bill was missing, even though no large orders had been processed that day. The conclusion was clear. She had pocketed the money. Within days, she too was fired. The fallout was swift and merciless, a fitting end for a web of deceit. And me? I got promoted to superintendent of the department. I walked away not just with my overtime intact, but with a renewed sense of purpose. I had shed the weight of a cheating girlfriend, exacted revenge on a conniving boss, and reclaimed control of my life. As the dust settled, I found myself with time to reflect on everything that had transpired. The plant, which had once been just a job, had transformed into a crucible where betrayal, karma, and personal growth collided. I realized that every twist and turn, however painful at the time, had ultimately led me to a stronger version of myself. I began to understand that sometimes life forces you into uncomfortable situations so you can learn important lessons. I'd learned that trust is fragile and that karma has a strange way of balancing the scales. I often found myself replaying that confrontation in my mind. The cold, calculated tone I'd used. The way my voice had steadied as I spoke those final words. It wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Late at night, when the plant was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I would ask myself, was it all worth it? And the answer was always the same. Yes, because I finally took control. I became more involved in every aspect of the plant's operations. I implemented stricter oversight procedures, ensuring that no one could pull a similar stunt again. The experience also taught me the importance of keeping personal and professional lives separate. I had grown both as a person and as a leader, determined to create a work environment where honesty and hard work were rewarded. Just as I was beginning to feel that I'd closed that painful chapter of my life, a new twist emerged that neither I nor anyone at the plant had anticipated. One day, during a routine meeting with the new management team, an old acquaintance from my past reached out. He had heard rumors about what had transpired and wanted to know more. I was surprised. My story had traveled far beyond the confines of our small town. At first, I was reluctant to revisit those dark memories. But as I shared my journey with him over coffee, I realized that my experience was more than just personal drama. It was a lesson in resilience, a testament to the fact that even in betrayal, there can be a path to redemption. Over time, I started receiving messages from people across the country, many sharing their own tales of betrayal and revenge. It was as if my story had become a beacon for those who had suffered and were looking for a sign that karma could indeed turn the tide. I even began speaking at local events about the importance of learning from life's betrayals, turning my pain into a message of empowerment. Looking back now, I realize that everything, the heartbreak, the confrontation, the unexpected alliances, and the eventual downfall of those who wronged me, was part of a larger tapestry. Life had woven a complex pattern of lessons, and I emerged from it with more than just scars. I gained wisdom and an unbreakable spirit. Every time I walk through the plant, I see reminders of that period. The quiet nods of acknowledgement from coworkers who once doubted me. The subtle smiles from those who recognized the value of integrity, and even the murmurs among new hires who hear the story whispered in the hallways. It's a legacy of karma, one that tells me that while betrayal might hurt for a moment, true justice has a way of finding its mark. Now, when I think about my journey, I'm filled with a quiet satisfaction. I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a chance to rebuild, to learn, and ultimately, to rise above. I may have lost a relationship and trusted colleagues, but I gained something much more valuable: a deeper understanding of who I am, and the conviction that no one can steal your dignity unless you allow it. Today, I lead the department with a clear vision, a vision built on trust, hard work, and the unwavering belief that every setback is just a setup for a greater comeback. I still remember that night when I walked out of that apartment, leaving behind not just a cheating girlfriend and a remorseful boss, but a chapter of my life that I refused to let define me. Now, I use my experience to mentor younger employees, encouraging them to stay true to themselves and to never compromise their values. I tell them, when life pushes you down, let it be the fuel that drives you to rise higher than you ever thought possible. It's a message that resonates deeply because I know firsthand how painful betrayal can be, but I also know how powerful the act of reclaiming your life can become. My story is a reminder that even in the face of deception and heartbreak, there's always an opportunity to rebuild, redefine, and ultimately triumph. As I sit here reflecting on the journey that brought me from that dark, painful time to the present, I realize that karma isn't just a fleeting moment of payback. It's an ongoing process. The lessons I learned continue to guide me every day, both in my professional life and in my personal relationships. Every story has its twists, its betrayals, and its moments of reckoning. Mine may have been particularly painful, but it also ignited a fire within me, a drive to ensure that justice, integrity, and hard work prevail. And while I may never forget the betrayal that set me on this path, I now embrace it as part of the story that shaped who I am. I'm proud of the person I've become, and I'm even prouder of the legacy I'm building, one where trust is earned, loyalty is paramount, and karma always finds a way to balance the scales. Betrayal, as painful as it is, forces us to re-examine our lives. In my case, it was the catalyst that led to greater self-awareness, a stronger work ethic, and an unwavering commitment to never letting anyone diminish my worth. The journey was long, filled with twists and emotional pitfalls, but it ultimately led me to a place of empowerment. Today, I stand as a testament to the fact that while the past can haunt us, it can also serve as the foundation for an even brighter future. And if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this: karma works in mysterious ways, and sometimes it delivers exactly what you deserve. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more true-to-life tales of betrayal, karma, and the unexpected twists that life throws at us. I've got more incredible stories lined up for you, and you won't want to miss them. Drop a comment below and let me know. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have confronted them? Or taken a different route? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on the latest uploads. Now, let's get back to this jaw-dropping conclusion. And that, my friends, is the story of how karma caught up with those who thought they could escape justice. What a ride, huh? But before you go, remember, life's twists and turns can often surprise us when we least expect it. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next story. We've got more coming your way that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, betrayal, and payback. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware, because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Thank you for watching, and remember, you can't outrun karma forever.